I'll tell that story. This is a good one. This is the good one. The Bima and the Narayana Kavacham. This is one of my favorite stories. Have you ever heard that one? Okay. So, on the 15th day of the battle, Dronacharya was killed because Dronacharya, in the start of the 15th day, he was using the astras on normal soldiers. And he was shooting like powerful weapons and killing millions of soldiers with the weapons. He wasn't supposed to do that, but he kind of got overcome with adharma at that time. And so he was doing things that he really wasn't supposed to do. So Krishna gathered everybody together and he said, Dronacharya is not acting the way he's supposed to. He lost his brain. He lost his head due to greed and lust and all these other things. So he needs to be killed. So we need to think of a plan in order to achieve this. So Bima, catching on what Krishna was saying, because you got to understand, in this war, Krishna never really wanted to play by the rules ever. And he never really plays by the rules ever anyway. So when they got to this part of the battle, everybody was kind of breaking the rules. So Bima, catching on to what Krishna was wanting, decided to go and catch Ashwatthama the elephant, because Dronacharya was very attached to his son Ashwatthama. So Bima realized he could pull a trick on Dronacharya, and he's the one that came up with this idea. So he went over and he killed the elephant named Ashwatthama, and then he went over to Dronacharya and he said, you are a Brahmin and you're not supposed to be fighting in this war. It's against your dharma. You see, these days we tend to associate Brahminicals or Swamis. We even call Swamis Maharaj, right? But in Varnashram society, everybody has benefits and restrictions that they're supposed to follow so that society behaves in the proper way. So someone like Dronacharya actually is not supposed to be fighting. Even though he teaches how to fight, he himself is not supposed to be fighting. So it's considered a sinful thing what he did in the fighting. So Bima said, because the Kurus provided for you, he used the word feed, but basically what he's getting across is Dronacharya had a palace, he had servants, he had a very luxurious lifestyle. It wasn't just room and board. So the Kurus provided a lot of salary to Dronacharya, and Bhima's pointing out that because he was given all this salary by the Kurus, he's descended into sinful living because he's fighting even though he's a Brahmin. So he said, even though you sold your soul for money to these Kurus, and I understand you did this because it was your son, Ashwatthama, and you're going to hell, you're going straight to hell after you're dead because of the behavior that you've done. But you've done this all for Ashwatthama, so you can stop that now because Ashwatthama's dead. So when Dronacharya heard that, he was devastated and he immediately put his bow down. But then he knows that Bima is intelligent. Out of all the Pandavas, Bima is probably the most intelligent in a certain way, and by that I mean sly. Bima is the sly one. Him and Krishna used to play jokes with Draupadi. They were very sly people. So Bima and Krishna were like, if they were in a classroom, the teacher would have to separate them. Because they'd always be doing something, you know? So Bima and Krishna, so Drona knows Bima's a tricky guy. He plays jokes. He's maybe doing something. So he says, I know, I'll go and ask Yudhisthira what's the real deal. Because Yudhisthira, he always tells the truth. So they went over to see Yudhisthira. Now, Krishna went over there. He got Arjuna he took the chariot right over there, and he's like, look, Dronacharya is about to come over here and ask you what's the news of Ashwatthama. Now we need you to tell him that Ashwatthama is dead. He tells him this, it's like almost as if talking to a child, because this is Yudhisthira's first time ever thinking about doing something like this. So Krishna comes to Yudhisthira and he asks him, please tell Dronacharya that Ashwatthama is dead. And Yudhisthira hesitates. And he's like, I don't want to. And Krishna's like, you got to do this. So here's this is where some of these things come in. Now, Yudhisthira, Dronacharya starts coming towards Yudhisthira. And he asks him, what's the news of Ashwatthama? So Yudhisthira is standing there, and he starts to hesitate because he's too attached to what he thinks is right as opposed to what is right. Because Krishna is coming to him and telling him specifically, you need to lie. He tells this to Yudhisthira. Tell him that Ashwatthama is killed. And Yudhisthira, he's hesitating because he's too attached to the materialistic concept of what's right and wrong. So as he's hesitating, see, he had a chariot that he always spoke the truth. And he's very proud of how he always spoke the truth. This is the shortfall of religiosity, is you can become attached to it, just like how you can become attached to irreligiosity. Dharma is just as tempting, if not more tempting, a snare as a dharma. And especially for some people, because they use religion and spirituality as a way to feel superior to others. You make absolutely no spiritual advancement if that's your intention or that's your reason. If you're saying to yourself, I want to feel better, I want to feel superior, no one consciously does that, but you can tell by the behaviors and the modalities of the people. If they become spiritual because they want to be superior to other people and feel they're better and morally superior, the moral high ground, then they're actually destroying their spirituality. And so Yudhisthira, he's hesitating. Yudhisthira's hesitating on this whole thing. He doesn't want to speak because he's too attached to concepts of dharma. So the wheels of his chariot start to touch the ground. And so it gets into his brain that maybe he's doing something wrong. So he says, Ashwatthama, the elephant. So he can't even lie. He has to whisper the elephant because he's still so attached. And some people say, a lot of the moralistic, high ground, pea-sized brain people sometimes spin the story that's because he lied that his wheels touched the ground. But that's not the way that this world works. His wheels touched the ground because he refused. He was too attached to his dharma and not attached to the truth, which is funny but true. Krishna tells this story a few times. So when he said that, Dronacharya immediately put his bow down. He sat on the chariot. He started to go into samadhi. And Drishtadyumna, who had been given the boon to kill Drona, he was born. The purpose of Drishtadyumna being born was to kill Drona. He's incarnation of Agni. He is a very powerful guy. He was fearsome. The Bima and Krishna both decided they wanted him to be the Senapati, or the general of the army, and he was a real fierce guy. They said that he looked like a tiger. That means his warrior. There's some, I could get into that a little bit, maybe later or now, but the Kshatriyas used to try, and it's kind of like animism. They would invoke the nature of these, the Kshatriyas are always described as tiger-like or lion-like, and that's because they try and embody these characteristics as they're fighters. But so they chose Drishtadyumna specifically because they wanted him to be the Senapati, because he was the most. Well, one reason is he never took any nonsense from the other generals. He would just tell them, when you have a leader, they're supposed to not really be the most diplomatic person, because there's things they're trying to accomplish. So Drishtadyumna would get in the face of anybody and tell them what they needed to do. So they liked that quality in him. He kind of was like what these days we call a straight shooter. Like, he didn't really mince his words. So Drishtadyumna, he sees that Dronacharya is in this state of samadhi, and he's going to leave his body, or because he's so depressed, or that his son is dead. So Drishtadyumna grabs his sword and leaps onto the chariot of Drona and grabs him by his thick dreadlocks and cuts his head off, and whirls it around over his head and slam dunks it right there on the battlefield in the mud. And when that happened, then everybody ran away. And Arjuna, he started to cry, and Bima laughed, and everybody had different, reactions. Bima never really liked Drona. He actually did not take any mantras from Drona because he considered him a charlatan. And also, Bima was the kind of Vaishnava that didn't want to use mantras from other gods. And most of the mantras that Dronacharya was dishing out were like tantric mantras, and it's a process wherein you ignite your chakras through different ways. There's dakinis, are goddesses which guard the chakras, and you form a relationship with them. And when you open up the different higher chakras, then it allows you to embed the mantras for the weapons within your different chakras, and then you can summon them. It's a whole process. Anyway, and Bima didn't want to tinker with that kind of thing, because Bima was a person of faith, and so it's because Bima is like Hanuman in that way, and Bima would use the same weapons as Arjuna. Bima would put an arrow on his bow, and he would use all the same weapons that Arjuna had, and some that he didn't even have. And one time, Arjuna went to Bima and he said, "Why is it that you can use these weapons? Who's the secret guru you had that taught you these weapons? Because I know that you didn't take any mantras and any instruction from Drona in this way." He taught Bima how to fight, but not the secret weapons and the secret codes and formulas and things like that. So he said, where did you get these weapons? How did this come to you? So Bima said, "Oh, it's simple. I just put my arrow on my bow and I pull it back and I say, 'Krishna, I need this,' and it'll come." Because that's the level of faith that he has. And this kind of ties into this. So after Dronacharya was killed, Arjuna started to cry. And he started to actually say, "Oh, we're all going to die now because we've killed my Guru Dev," and he's crying over this way. And he's the pet disciple of Drona, so it's not surprising, but Bima had to kind of correct him. So he grabbed, because you don't want to show that kind of, he's the enemy. So Bima grabbed him by the shoulders and just held him there. Now, Arjuna was the Amsha, that means the power of Indra, which is nothing small. And Bima grabbed him by the shoulders and just held him firm and started yelling at him to get them to be quiet. He said, stop acting like a little girl in front of our soldiers. You're supposed to increase the morale. You're cursing everybody, saying that we're going to be destroyed by the Kurus because we've done all these different things, and you keep on calling Dronacharya your guru. But what kind of guru was he? If he was such a spiritual guru, then why did he not even say one single word when Krishna was being blasphemed by Shishupal? Everybody that was there spoke up. When Shishupal was talking bad about Krishna, everybody spoke and said something, but Dronacharya didn't say a thing. So what kind of guru was he? And if he was your father, you keep on saying, oh, my father is dead. Your father's Pandu. Your father is Krishna. If he was your father, why didn't he do anything when Draupadi was being raped? So what kind of a person was he to you? He took your affection and turned it against you. He's a sham. He's a fake. He's a phony. He wasn't your guru. You need to snap out of it. So he kind of slapped him around a little bit and got his senses knocked into him. Because Bima is the bigger brother, he has to do that. So after Bima kind of laid into him a little bit, then he said a few other things. It's really cool stuff if you read it, like Bima's getting into him. And he's talking about fake gurus and all this, fake devotion. And usually it's these people that are anyway, this neat stuff. So Bima, then Drishtadyumna, he wants to explain where his position is. So he went a little bit far, but so he said, hey, I did nothing wrong. I honored Drona. He said, look, I put his head in the holy dust of Kurukshetra. There's no better place than that. He said, if I had a preference, I would have took his head and carried it with me and thrown it where the pigs live, because that's where it deserves to go. But I put it in this dust of Kurukshetra, so I gave him some honor. You shouldn't be too mad at me. That lets you know how spicy Drishtadyumna was. So then Satyaki speaks up. So now you gotta understand that Satyaki is one of the Yadavas, and he's related to Krishna. And Satyaki's kind of like Drishtadyumna in the sense that he don't really hold his tongue. And he's like a firebrand. He even called Balaram a coward at one point because Balaram wanted peace between the Kurus and the Pandavas. And he just flat out called Balaram a coward, and that he didn't even deserve to be called a Yadava. So that kind of lets you know what kind of person Satyaki was. So when he's, you gotta understand that, so Arjuna was his guru and Drona was his guru. So he's kind of like a grand disciple of Dronacharya, and so the act of killing Dronacharya was kind of offensive to Satyaki. So he decided that he was going to take personal issue with the words that Drishtadyumna was speaking, because there's nothing he could have said to Bima. So he kind of decided to butt in with Drishtadyumna's little remarks, because Bima didn't say anything specifically technically wrong, and Drishtadyumna kind of more put it in the slander side. So Satyaki decided that he took issue with what Drishtadyumna had said. So he said, your whole family, he said, there's no more cursed family than the Panchalas. He said, your father offended Drona. Your brother became a woman and killed Bhishma, and you killed Drona. So all you do is kill holy people. He said, your whole family is cursed, and if you keep on talking in that way, I'll smash your head in with my club. So, hearing these things, Drishtadyumna said, this is a funny way of handling these kind of issues. It's not really the best way to speak to people that offend you, but Drishtadyumna said, this is Mahabharat, and that's the beauty part, because Mahabharat is more of this down-to-earth, realistic exchanges between people. So Drishtadyumna said, he says, I forgive you for the ignorant words which you spoke, despite the fact that for evil, wretched, unintelligent persons like yourself, forgiveness is a foreign term. And me forgiving you is about as useful as a mirror to a blind person. I still forgive you. Which is a pretty sick burn. So he said, so then they started getting into fights, and Satyaki came forward and he grabbed his weapon. He started running at Drishtadyumna, and Bima grabbed him and was like holding him back. Now, Satyaki, by the way, when Banasura, who was the grandson of Prahlad, who had 1,000 arms and was using 500 bows, fought against Krishna in the battle, it wasn't Krishna had to fight with Shiva, and Balaram fought with Kartikeya, and who fought with Banasura was Satyaki. I mean, single-handedly, this person fought against Banasura, who had 500 bows, and it was Satyaki on the other side, and he stood toe-to-toe with him. So he was a great fighter. So Satyaki and Drishtadyumna are about to duke it out, and Krishna shows up, and he's like, we all need to calm down, because, and it says just like how the full moon will cool down the heat. Krishna came and he spoke and he said, look, we all need to calm down because the enemy isn't here, the enemy's over there, and we just managed to kill the leading general, and obviously Ashwatthama is going to seek revenge, so we need to do something about that right now. So Ashwatthama saw that all the Kuru soldiers had run away, and so they're running and they're hiding. So Ashwatthama says there must be something wrong. So he went to Duryodhana and said, what happened? Why is everyone running away? And now Ashwatthama is the kind of person, he's a big guy. A lot of times, in these movies and whatnot, they'll give very bad depictions of these characters. So Ashwatthama was a very big guy. He was like Bima big. He's muscular and tall and big shoulders, and they said in 3 ways he was like a bull: in his neck, in his voice, and in the way that he walked. So you can imagine just like how a bull is. It's like this big creature with a bull neck and all that. So this isn't like some little skinny brahmachari dude. This is a big dude. So Ashwatthama was a kind of scary guy too. He wore red, and his eyes, they glowed because of the Shakti that he had. And he had these big thick dreadlocks, and he wore all red, and he had all red tilak. And he had a gem in the middle of his forehead where Shiva has an eye. So this big guy, everyone was scared of him. They didn't even want his shadow to touch them. They were terrified of his potency. So this Ashwatthama comes, and what's going on? So Duryodhana, who's the king, he's too scared to talk. So he says, Kripacharya, you tell him, because Kripacharya was his uncle. Because Kripi was married to, he's his mama, he's his maternal uncle. Because Kripi was married to Drona, and that's his mother. So Kripacharya said, your father's been killed. They told him that you were dead, and he got discouraged, and they killed him. So Ashwatthama became enraged. So he took his weapons and he got up on top of his chariot, and he told all the soldiers, wait. And he started to roar really loud and get into this kind of like almost destruction of the world dance, and with his weapons and going crazy and roaring and louder, and all the soldiers, when they heard that, they stopped running because they were like, oh yeah, this big scary wizard dude, his father is killed, so he's going to seek revenge. So they took Ashwatthama and got around him, and Ashwatthama lifted his arrow in the sky, and he said, I have a weapon that my father gave me in case of dire emergency like this. And it's called Narayana Ashtra, and it has the same potency as Narayan. So by using this weapon, we'll destroy the Pandava army right now. So he got the weapon, and he put it on his bow, and he let it loose. So all of a sudden, it started, this big wind came upon an army, and the wind is carrying ashes and charcoal and burning people, and everyone starts to get scared. It gets dark. So Krishna, everyone's worried, and Krishna gathers all the generals together, and he says, I know this weapon. This weapon is Narayana Astra, and this weapon, it will destroy everybody, but if you become a non-combatant, that is, if you lay on the ground, then the weapon will leave you alone. So we all have to take off our armor and put our weapons down and lay prone on the ground. And then the weapon will pass right over us and no one will be hurt. So everybody started to do that. Everybody's taking their weapons off. Everybody's taking the armor. They're starting to lay on the ground. And this, wind's coming. There's one person they're not doing that. And that's Bima. And he's just standing there with the club on his shoulder. He's waiting. And Arjuna comes over. He says, Krishna, we got to go over and talk to Bima. So they went over there, and Bima's standing with the club on his shoulder. He's looking at the battlefield. They're the only person. And Arjuna says, Bima, why are you not doing what everyone else is doing? Why are you not getting on the ground? And Bima says, look, I think it's because you spend too much time with him. You don't quite understand what's happening here. Because, you see, Krishna is God. And he protects people. I know for a fact that nothing bad is going to happen to me, because Krishna's going to watch out for me. Nothing bad ever happens to me because Krishna watches out for me. And you spend too much time with him. He's sitting on your chariot, and if you want him to turn right or left, you hit him with your boot. That lets you know. You just see him as a person or something. I don't quite get it, but he's God and he's protect me. So I'm not worried about the weapon, but I'm more worried is that Duryodhana's going to see me, and I have the laying on the ground like a little girl, and I'm not going to let him do that. That's what I'm more concerned of. I'm not going to just lay on the ground like that. So I'm more, if I get killed by the weapon, right, it's Narayana Astra, right, so I get moksha. So what do I care if it kills me? And if it doesn't kill me, which it won't, because I know I won't be hurt, so I don't have anything to worry about. So I'm just going to stand here and not worry. So that's what Bima decided. So he's standing there, and all of a sudden, this tsunami, that's the best word for it. It's like a fire tsunami. It's like fiery weapons. It's like all these weapons are like racing at everybody, and it's all concentrated in one place, in one direction. In one location, there's the fiery tsunami, and it's heading right at Bima. All these weapons, they're just racing at Bima in one place. And everyone else is lying on the ground, and they're terrified, they're petrified, but Bima. And he's standing there with his club on his shoulder. And it's coming in closer and closer, and his eyebrows, he's got a helmet and all his armor, and his eyebrows, they start to singe from the heat of this weapon as it comes close. So, in sheer incredulity, as if this is a joke, it's like he's asking the universe or Krishna, is this a joke? He goes, and he snorts like a bull. Like, what is this? What is this, a joke? So, when he snorts, in utter disbelief that his eyebrows are actually being singed, the whole thing, the whole weapon, it vanishes in thin air, like that. Gone. So that, you see, there's a few ways of looking at this. Now one of them is that, see, Bhima's connection to Krishna was so strong. But it's also his belief was so strong. It's double. It's belief in Krishna. Krishna can do these things, but his belief was so strong as well. You see, some people, they have a connection to Krishna, but maybe they don't believe the way that Bima did. So that's how he can do these things. It's like Arjuna had to take lessons from Drona to use weapons, but Bima could use the same weapons and more, but he just had a connection to Krishna. He believed. In the same way, it's us that gets in the way. And when you have a attachment to a beloved, the false sense, the false ego, the false ideas, the things that keep you from being your highest potential, the things that keep you from becoming the best person, the best whatever it is that you are. When you have that attachment to a beloved, like in Bima's particular case, it's kind of like Sakya Ras mixed with almost like fraternal. He kind of saw Krishna as a brother type figure as well. It's kind of mixed. All the Pandavas kind of mixed with the friendship and relation and family kind of ties. Especially with Krishna, he's like their maternal uncle. So when you have that kind of connection, then unlimited possibilities and potentials. And this is why oftentimes I'll tell people they have the power, that you are the magic. Because really, it's what it's got to do is with what you believe in strongly and your connection to that kind of spiritual source of things. And that's what can achieve unlimited possibilities. But people, they don't have that. They don't believe it. There's numerous reasons, and all 100% of them have something to do entirely with your false ego. So this is why we have these things like spiritual practices and sadhana and things like that, because they're supposed to, or their goal in using them or doing them is to help us to detach ourselves in a gradual way from that concept of the false ego, the false humility, and all this stuff that gets in the way of us actually being the most amazing person that we could be, all thanks to Krishna, right? So the fullest expression of ourself, I put it that way. And so the way, there's different paths, right? So, the Shaiva people will meditate on death to destroy their ego. And they'll take copious amounts of intoxication to disassociate. They'll either take, it prepares them for death. They'll take tons and tons and tons and tons of ganja and tons and tons and tons of alcohol at the same time. And they try not to actually budge their consciousness from the state of their meditation. It's like practice, I guess. Because when they die, they don't want to lose that either, and death is, your senses are overwhelmed. So that's the process by which they do that. But that's really intense kind of a thing. So attaching your mind to a beloved is the best and easiest way to overcome the false ego. Anyway, so I think that's good for right now.
Oh, you just cut yourself off in mid-sentence.
Huh?
You have to close it.
Oh.
Maybe a little bit and say what you just said to close it so I can cut that.
Okay, sure. So, so being attached to a beloved is the surefire, best, and easiest way, because we naturally feel emotion for a beloved. So when you have that beloved person as your deity, then, and you can fully absorb in that deity because you know they love you, then it's easy for you to be detached from the false ego. And that's what bhakti really is. And so that's that deal with faith that Bima had. So anyway, you are the magic, you are the power, and you can get a lot of things done when you have that connection. And you overcome the false ego through various methods. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you join us next week. We'll have another story for you. If you like what I said, please leave comments.